Hey, it's Coach Ans from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online, and we're here today to talk to you a little bit more about ACT, specifically ACT reading and how important it is, of course, that you do well when it comes to ACT reading, because what it does, of course, if you have the proper strategy and you have the proper mind frame when you go into ACT, you can do very well, of course, when it comes to ACT reading. And it can do a whole lot, towards, padding your overall composite score. And it's important that we get a good composite score, because what that does, of course, is it opens up scholarship opportunities for us, which can be quite extensive and quite lucrative. And in addition to that, of course, it gives us an opportunity to apply to whatever colleges we want, and in most cases get in based on the ACT score, of course, that you create or that you have. So based on that, what we've tried to do, of course, is give you some strategies that you can utilize, of course, to do as well as you possibly can. Keep in mind, we also keep prefacing by saying that you should take the things that we're doing, put to use as many things as you can, because most of these strategies come from ACT, and ACT should be the expert on ACT. And what they tell you, if you follow some of these strategies and along with some of the things that we've created and some of the things that, of course, you can kind of create yourself, because you better than anyone else, you can do quite well. What we're going to do today is we're going to finish up the sample ACT test that we took, on the reading section. And what we're going to do, of course, is go through, look at questions number 36 through 40, and try to give you an explanation of why those questions, of course, were the answers, why those answers to those questions were the correct ones, and what the rationale, of course, for those answers were. What we're going to do, of course, is show you the annotations that we did. And once again, this is not new. When we went through over questions 31 through 35, we gave you the same annotations. And what we think is important is that you go through and highlight main ideas, first sentences of each one of the paragraphs, go through, of course, and find a conclusion, and then answer some questions. And looking at these questions, these are the types of questions that we ask ourselves, of course, when we go through and we're addressing these informational passages like this. And this one is going to be, on natural science stuff, but it's still informational in nature. So we can ask ourselves these questions. And if we can answer these questions, if we can ask these questions like I did here, you won't have a great deal of difficulty figuring out, what the author's, purpose is when he's writing these passages. We're going to start with question number 36. This is, which of the following provides the best paraphrases of lines 7 through 11? And we'll pull out lines 7 through 11, read it, and see which one of these, of course, would be an appropriate paraphrase. F, annual plants survive in deserts by making seeds swiftly when conditions are right. G, annual plants in deserts make seeds during dry conditions so the seeds will be ready when rain arrives. D, dry conditions require the seeds of desert plants to start germination prior to the arrival of rain. J, the seeds of annual plants in deserts are designed to wait for years for the right conditions for growth. Well, when we look at it, says the plants, when we look at those questions, 7 through 11, those lines 7 through 11, says the plant's challenge is to be quick enough to respond to rain so that they can produce seeds before the earth dries up again, while not jumping the gun to start growth until there is sufficient water for them to grow to maturity for seed production. Well, the paraphrase, it says the plant's challenge. So what we're saying is that plants have to be quick enough, to put out, seeds, before the moisture goes away, basically, and not go overboard or, jump the gun and go too quickly. Well, when we look at that, the best answer is probably going to be F. It says plants survive in deserts by making seeds swiftly when conditions are right. And that's what it basically is. That's what basically is said here, that plants have to, seize the opportunity when the conditions are right, put their seeds out, and not jump the gun. And the answer that best exemplifies that is going to be F. So the rationale is line 7 through 11 explain that desert annuals wait for the right conditions to germinate. Question 37. Based on the passage, it can be most reasonably inferred. And once again, during our annotations and the questions that we ask ourselves, we go through and try to handle some of the inferences before we even get to them. But based on the passage, it can be reasonably inferred that the scarring some seeds require before germination is accomplished through. So we're looking at scarring. We have to go back in our paragraph, find out where scarring is talked about. Intense drying experience between rainfall, internal tension from the seed capsule sepals, chemicals in the seeds, abrasion sustained during flash floods. Well, when I look at that word scarring, I think about damage. When I look at these here, the only one of these that has anything that deals with damage is abrasion. I know that if something is you have an abrasion, that means that you've hurt yourself or something's been damaged to some degree. So when I look at that, that sends my antenna up just by looking at that choice of words here. And we'll see if that sending my antenna up gives me insight into why that might be the correct answer. Well, it says the solution applied by the people who inhabited the Negev in past centuries was a practice they called runoff farming. Farmers had mastered harnessing the flash floods that rushed down into the gullies by catching the runoffs, not only by making terraces, but also building large cisterns into which the running water was directed to be held for later use. Well, that doesn't mention scarring. Well, when I go back and I start looking at it, the lines that they gave us here, well, these lines that I chose really didn't help me a great deal, but let's see where we come. Well, they did talk about the flash floods, but it doesn't really say that, but well, here it is. It says, we help agricultural plants to capture precipitation by scarring the soil to facilitate infiltration of the water into it and hence into the roots. So what it's saying up there is that in moist regions, people can do that. They can scar the seeds. But when it comes to dry regions, like in the Negev here, flash floods provide the scarring by the abrasion that happens when the flash floods run through, and of course they hit the seeds, and that's what causes germination. And that, of course, is the reason why the answer is the answer. So the passage explains that some desert plants require mechanical scarring of their seed coats, which occurs when they are subject to flash floods. So in other words, sometimes scarring is done by man, and sometimes, in this particular case in the desert, the scarring has to be done by some kind of natural means, in this particular case, the flash floods. But just by me recognizing the word scarring and then looking at abrasion, that sent me in the proper direction, even though it's difficult for me to pull that information out. And you saw how difficult it was for me to pull that out. But I still had the correct answer because I understood what this and this word, of course, had in common. Question 38. Even some of us that have been doing this for a long time, we still have a little difficulty too sometimes, but if we have the right mindset and we're dogged in our determination, we still can answer those questions. As it is used in line 26, the word extent most nearly means. I love these questions that give us some vocabulary, because when I start looking at words of vocabulary, I don't even have to read to get those questions, and that's one of the things that ACT will tell you. Sometimes when you're looking at the vocabulary, you can go through and answer vocabulary questions sometimes without even having to do a whole lot, but going through and looking at the sentence where you find the word, and then looking at it in context. So I know it's on line 26, so I'm gonna run over line 26 and see what that word says. But now I'm gonna start by reading the sentence where the word appears. However, when the sepals are sufficiently wetted, then the tension increases to such an extent that the lock mechanism snaps and the capsule explodes and releases the seeds. Well, extent. Well, in line 26, extent refers to the degree or level of tension that builds up in the sepals of the plant capsule. The word degree here best captures the meaning of how much tension is needed for the seed capsule to release. So degree, extent, I know is synonymous to some degree with degree. So when you look at it, I can answer that question based on looking at what I have here in terms of looking at the word extent itself and looking at degree. That's because, if you're good with vocabulary, a lot of these things you can answer just by your use of vocabulary. And one of the strategies I think that I introduced early on when we were talking about ACT reading is sometimes the best thing to do when it comes to vocabulary, and if you're real good with vocabulary, you can probably go and answer those questions just based on what you know in terms of vocabulary without having to go through and read the paragraph or the passage. According to the passage, number 39, which of the following actions did the people in the Negev desert take in order to farm there? A, plowing the soil, widening gullies, constructing terraces, constructing aqueducts. Well, I already know the answer to that because I've in the previous question, and ACT does this from time to time. I can answer this question based on what I read in the last question. In the last question, we had the same passage here, and they were talking about runoffs. In this particular case, it says people in the Negev made terraces. Well, sometimes the answer just is what the answer is, and constructing terraces is the best answer here. So if they give you one, take it. Don't sit there and talk yourself out of it and make it more difficult than it is, because sometimes the answer is just what the answer is. It is what they tell you. Question 40, the final one, based on the passage, the pleats in the body of the saguaro cactus. Now, in this whole passage, most of the questions have made reference to the saguaro cactus only a few times. So we don't know a whole lot about the saguaro cactus because we haven't pulled a great deal out of the reading. But now, let's look at the saguaro cactus. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I might have to go back and reread where it talked about the saguaro cactus, because I've been talking about ants, I've been talking about frogs. So maybe I need to go back and look at that, briefly. But based on the passage, the pleats in the body of the saguaro cactus, F, increase the efficiency of photosynthesis, allow the cactus to expand from storing water. When I think about cactuses, the one thing I think about cactuses, as a youngster growing up, and in the desert, how people, of course, cut the cactus and drink the water out of the cactus. It's kind of a simplistic idea, but as a kid growing up, that's one of the things that you hear all the time. And that puts that in my mind. I don't know if that's the case, but that's one of the things that I think about. So allows the cactus to expand for storing water. H, reduce evaporative loss of water, regulates the cactus's growth. Well, when I look at that, it says this trunk is pleated, talking about the saguaro, the trunk is pleated like an accordion and can swell to store tons of water. Sometimes swell to store tons of water, sometimes the answer just is what the answer is. And in this particular case, it allows the cactus to expand for storing water. This is Coach Anderson from Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online. We hope you gain some valuable insights when it comes to ACT reading. And we've talked to you about how important it is that you do as good a job as you possibly can do, because it means more money for you when it comes to scholarship opportunities. And in addition to that, it means that you can get into whatever university that you like, which ACT has a very strong influence on. So what we want you to understand is this: if you didn't do as well as you thought you should have done, it may take some adjustment in terms of your strategy, in terms of your plan. So once again, as an old coach, I keep telling you, one of the things that whenever we weren't successful at something, we would go back and we would watch the film. And when we watched the film and we went through and we reviewed, we found out what our weaknesses were, and we attacked those weaknesses and try to get better that way. And we suggest that you take the same tact when it comes to trying to get better when it comes to ACT. So once again, this is Coach Anderson, Mississippi Public Broadcasting Online. Make sure you understand that ACT, this particular ACT reading, is very, very important. Do as well as you possibly can. And on the next lessons that we have, we'll go through and try to give you some strategies that can help even more when it comes to your ACT reading success. This is Coach Anderson. We'll see you next time.